All right, this is session 2 for the IDOT District 6 New Employee Working Group. We're picking up, we're going to continue with Illinois 78. It's a 3P project that has a lot of spot 3R type locations, and let's go ahead and continue. As you remember in the first session, we created the alignment, and I'm going to jump over to ProjectWise. Here, and that was this file. So that was in the design folder. Of course, we talked about using the CAD manual. Because you guys are going to be creating your own files, you need to try to your best ability to use the standard IDOT file naming conventions. And because designers now have their own alignment file, you may have your own topo file, you might even have your own terrain file. So that file is always going to have the word design at the end, so it's clear that it's more of a copy of surveys file. It's in your design folder, and like we talked the last session, what that does for you is it gives you the ability to add your profile, because as you guys know, in the alignment that's where our profile is stored. Now it's part of the alignment, and that's the reason why you guys need to have your own copy of the alignment file. And the topo's kind of similar that way. Here shortly, once we get these files created, we can talk about that. So one of the first things we're going to do as part of this session is create just a couple files that we're going to be using today. And we talked about this a little bit the last section. I don't think we recorded it though, but there's a couple different ways that you can go about accessing seed files now to create yourself a new file. And one way that I would probably recommend would be when a file when a folder first gets set up and Frank creates the job for you, he can place a file in here, or you might want to talk about this a little bit, Frank, or they could themselves. But he usually uses this standard file naming convention. It's a 00 file creation template. And the reason for that, the reason for using that template instead of the standard IDOT seed file, is because with ORD we really need to set our coordinate system. And each job, I don't know how many coordinate systems there are in District 6, like maybe 4 or 5 or something like that. So rather than every time you guys create a file that you have to go and set that coordinate system, well, if you set up that seed file with that coordinate system, then it's just automatically done for you. And so I'll open up this file, and so I've already set the coordinate system here in this seed file, but I'll show you what I mean by that. I really like this. Maybe it's a little bit of a crutch, but in ORD it's so nice that if you know the name of a tool, one way of going to it is to go up in that search bar and just start typing, and it'll take you right there. And then it gives you a couple options. It'll either take you right to it, or it also shows, what's nice too is, and they may have talked about this in your other class that you had, but it shows you where in the ribbon that you can find any of those tools that you're searching for. Okay, so here's the coordinate system. Then all you're going to do is click that button there, and then you see there's a few to choose from here. Let's see, I don't remember if I saved these or in my favorites or if they were already out there. In any case, this particular one uses the Harn. And here in District 6, we're in the Illinois West Zone. So that's set. So that'd be like the last time on a project you have to think about that or deal with that. So that as long as you use that seed file to create your own files, it's a done deal. You never have to think about it again. Other things you might want to do in that seed file of your own personal project seed file is, you probably noticed if you use the IDOT one when you first get into it that you see all the views are up, look something like this. You might have, maybe you always use two windows in ORD, and let's say that your I think by default view 5, 6, and 8 is always in that first one, and then you're like, hey, I can't drag this window over. How do I even get it over to that other side? It's kind of a headache. So you have to go in the upper left-hand corner, and you click on. It would normally say change. I've got this set up just for one screen because we only have one screen today. But normally it would say change screen, and then that shoots the window over. And you go through that process like over and over and over again. So rather than having to do that, just set up your seed file just the way you like it. You never have to deal with it. I think fill by default used to be turned off. That used to be kind of annoying. Under view attributes, I believe it's turned on now. Things like that. Maybe your snap, for your snap mode, like I always use key point, but I know a lot of people use these like multi-snaps, or whatever your default is. Set all your defaults in that seed file. Do a save settings, and you don't have to do the same thing over and over and over again. Okay, so that's the seed file. So let's go ahead and create a couple files that we're going to be working with today. Yeah.
So we'll get a seed file. We get a seed file from Frank, and then we can go in and customize it the way we want it. Is that how it works? Is that what you're saying? But we have to get the seed file from him first, correct?
Right. Yeah, you could ask Frank to provide that to you, or if you know where it's at, you could get what would you prefer, Frank, as far as them?
Oh, I'll probably just end up making the template file for them already. Like when I set up the project, I'll just go into design and set up a template file for them.
Nice.
I'll figure out the coordinate system.
Yeah, that's great, because then they don't have to deal with it. That's awesome.
They can just go in there and set up the settings the way they want it.
Yeah, but you'll still have permit. So he's saying that you don't have to worry about going out and finding it and putting it out here. He'll check with surveys to find out what the coordinate system is. He'll put the template out for you. He'll make sure the right coordinate system's set. But you still have permissions to it, though. You can still open up that file and change any other setting that you want to, do a save setting, and then you're good to go. You're good to start making yourself some files. So the way, multiple ways that you can do it. One way would be to just right-click on that template file. Let's see. Of course, copy, paste. And we say yes. And then if you click on that advanced wizard, that's probably good. If you don't do that, then it might say there's already a file with that name. So we're going to rename that file. So I'm going to use the advanced wizard. Next. Yes, we want it to be in the design folder. And I'm going to leave that selected, the one up at the top, because that's saying it's making a copy from ProjectWise from the template that Frank put out there for us. I hit next, and here's the part that's kind of crazy, or not intuitive, I would say. It says create a new version. Like, wouldn't you think that the answer would be yes, but the answer is no. So do not check that, I believe. Frank says yes, or no. You know what I mean. All right. All right, so I'm going to rename that template. Of course, we always start off with the D6 contract number. 72, the real life contract number was K96. I'm just going to use that here. And then we are going to have our own topo file. Again, having your own topo file is not something that you would absolutely have to do. It's an option to you. I think you would prefer it. Generally speaking, the topo file that is in the surveys folder is going to be a 3D topo file, which has value. As you're developing your project, for design purposes, you may want to reference in that 3D topo file. But generally speaking, like with working with the topo file, it's just a lot easier to use the 2D version, the one that you're going to include in your plans, the one that you're going to go into and maybe clean up yourself. Because another reason why you may want to have your own topo file, and you may want that topo file to be 2D, would be things like, it's more aesthetics than anything. It's up to you if you want to do this or not, but you've probably noticed like on certain jobs where like a mailbox, like you've got your plan sheet and the mailbox will be upside down. You got power poles and it shows like the direction the power poles are going, but they're turned, Some people can say, heck with that, they live with it. Other people, it makes them crazy. They're like, nah, I just want a clean looking set of plans. And so by having your own topo file, it gives you the ability to make those little cleanup things. Maybe you've got a situation at the nose of an island or median, something like that, and it's real choppy. Maybe you go through and kind of clean it up a little bit if you desire to do it. So that's several reasons why you may want to have your own version. Also with a 2D version, you can rotate the view much easier and things like this. So, but again, there's a couple things I'm going to be covering here. First thing that you don't absolutely have to do. If you like, just point to the surveys version of it. But remember that you don't have permissions, to make any changes. You can only view their files as read-only. So I would recommend making your own file, but do what you want. It's your option. And if you want, make it a 2D file. So I'm going to name that file. And there actually is an official naming convention for this. It's called topo in lowercase. If you go to the CAD manual, you'll see the file naming. It's uppercase design, and that's it. So topo, lowercase topo, uppercase design. Always a good idea to give it some kind of description. I'm just going to say topo designer version, maybe 2D. I like, with some of these survey files, making it clear if it's a 2D or 3D file. And so I'm going to create a 2D version of that file, and I'll just say designer version, something like that. And then down at the bottom, this, hopefully by default it says Open Roads Designer for you, but I've noticed sometimes it says SS10 or the other version, Geopack, Power Geopack. If you're dealing with an Open Roads job and it says anything except for Open Roads Designer, make sure you change that there. The reason is, I believe that's how it knows that it's an Open Roads file. So when you double click on it, so it opens up the ORD application, not Power Geopack. It's file association within ProjectWise. All right, so there's your topo file. Let's go ahead and get into that topo file. And then we're going to reference in Survey's 3D version of that topo and just merge it in, and then you've got yourself a 2D file. Now, it might be tempting at times to do it. Make sure you do it that way. I'll always use, whenever you create files from survey files, it's possible to grab one of those survey files and copy it into your folder. But I definitely recommend not doing that, just because surveys are done so early. Sometimes they might be like older seed files. I've seen a lot with like the old feature definitions that were used in ORD, things like this. You're definitely better off when you're creating your own files to always start with a nice clean seed and then just reference in the other file and merge it in.
Other than the file happens to be SS10 that you're referencing, do not merge that one into master.
Oh, no merge into master?
Well, it just, now, it goes back and forth with it, with SS10 and ORD stuff. eventually it gets corrupted. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time I've seen it, it does, and then you just have to recover it, so. I know-
So if they want a 2D version of a topo, if they want their own topo file, this 2D version, would you recommend still referencing it in, but copy it in, don't merge it, or?
Well, see, that's copy's the other thing too. Kind of still at the unknown stage of that one. I mean, you can try it. I have no problem with
Yeah.
anybody trying to copy stuff in. But if it gets corrupted, I'm gonna know what probably happened.
Right.
Uh,
And so what they might want to do is, like, if you're going to copy anything in, like I'm going to do here, and maybe it's coming from an SS10 file, like, I'm only going to do that in the topo file. I would never copy anything from SS10 into, like, any of your, like, model files or anything that's your ORD design files of importance, you know. In this case, if the topo file, if there's any kind of problem with the topo file, of course, you still have the survey version of it.
I know what Mike usually does, it's a longer process, but as far as I know, he's never had corruption errors, is that he'll reference in the topo file, and then he basically just draws on top of it with the new ORD levels and all that stuff.
Yeah, that would be a super safe way of doing. Now that would take some time.
It would take time, but yeah. So.
Okay, and you know what? As we go through this class, just like that, well, just like I said before we even got started, I think there's going to be a lot of things like this that all this is brand new. All these processes aren't fully worked out. I'll go through this the way I developed the project, and then once we come to like determinations for like absolute certainty, what our processes are going to be, then maybe we can come back and put that text across the video, or we'll create a new video if anything changes. So that's really the only way I know how to proceed, just so we can keep going.
I would just do it the way you're going to do it on this one.
Yeah, just so people know, when you're watching back this video, know that maybe at this point, these processes aren't fully established. Eventually, there won't be any SS10 files out there. There's so many right now. You're going to be dealing with this for a few years. But eventually, and going forward, any new project that surveys picks up and processes is an ORD. But there's a lot of times when surveys is going to refer back to their old files. Just because the topo is finished, it's like they don't want to go out and completely resurvey a job or even reprocess. Because when the surveyors process in their topo file, they spend a lot of time editing and things like that. It's not like they can even just take the raw data and bring it into ORD, because they would have to redo all that editing. So they're probably going to want to use those SS10 files for a while. Okay, we'll continue. So the way on this job anyway, what I did was I just went to Reference, Tools Attach, and then I'm going to point to the Surveys folder. And in this case, and again, this is another thing that as time goes on, things will change. Like right now, I've got 3 files. Eventually, you're only going to have 2 files, and that's going to be the alignment file, which is a 2D file, and then you're going to have this all file. And that contains your DTM, your topo, your break lines, your points, maybe LiDAR information. Like everything will be in that all file. But with this particular job, it's just like we talked. It was, it was done over many years, and it kind of pieced together. And maybe that's the difference, maybe like with this class than taking like a Bentley Fundamentals class. Because in a Bentley Fundamentals class, of course, they're going to be teaching the class as like in the ideal world, right? But in the real world, working here at District 6, you're dealing with SS10. So hopefully, as part of this class, we'll try to keep it a little bit more real life and talk about some of the problems that you might run into that, if you took just the fundamentals class, you wouldn't figure out. So this class does have a separate topo file, and even for some reason it has 2D in the name, that it's actually a 3D file. I'm going to say OK. Reference it in. There's my topo. And of course, there's two different ways that you can do this. I guess I do tend to use the merge into master, that maybe that's not the best practice. The other way would be to just select all the elements and copy them. But if you do the copy, you need to really make sure that you copy it right on top of itself. So you're either going to put a line out there and make sure you're snapping to the same line twice, or you're going to key in a distance of 0, or do something so you make sure that that topo is right on top of itself. In my case, I'm just going to right click, say merge into master, data point one time, and it merges those elements into this design file, and then it detaches that reference file. So now that 3D file is now a 2D file. One of the reasons why I like that is I tend to use these view controls up here quite a bit, like with the rotate view. A 3D file doesn't really have this option. It's only like dynamic. When you go to rotate it, it's rotating upon all axes. So I can just click twice, do something like this. I can get that roadway to look like it would on a plan sheet. So as I'm working with this, to me, it makes it a little bit easier to work. And then, here's just one of those examples that I talked about. And this is minor. And you guys, maybe tell me what you think about it. See if you agree with this or not. All right. If you are looking at your plan sheet, would it be okay with you if, like, that HMA, it's upside down? Does that matter? Are you cool with that? Or would you rather be like, no, does that bother you a little bit?
It all depends when the letting date is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a little anal, but like I would, I would go to that personally. I'd rather go to that mailbox and say, maybe put the mailbox up. That sign right there. Let's say, depending on what type of sign, maybe I know that sign is going with the main line. Yes, that's a sign symbol, but it's pointing the other way. It's like, personally, I would just put it the direction it's going. Now, surveys used to have a full-time person for years when I first hired on here at District 6. They went through several people, and I think it was like an ET3 position, and that person would go through every survey, and they would do all this work for you. But right now, Surveys doesn't have that position available, so it's really up to you. They're going to clean it up, pretty decent, but if you want to take it to this level of really getting it looking really good aesthetically, then you'll probably need to have your own 2D file. All right, let's move on. Any questions about the Topo 2D? If not, let's see, I'm just going to do save settings and get out of this, and we will move on. We got a little bit more time in this session 2 that we're going to do before a break, so we'll cover one more thing before we take a break. Next, let's see. Okay. And maybe a lot of today with this project, it is, we're looking forward to jumping in and designing this job, but realistically, when you get started on a project, there are certain things you have to do to kind of get started. We did the alignment, we've got the topo. Now the next one is optional, and again, I've talked to Frank about this a little bit. This may change, it may not, so remember again, this one's optional. When it comes to surveys, you need the alignment, and then you need your topo, but you also need a DTM, a digital terrain model, right? And so you could just point to the surveys And let's take a look at that one, and I'll show you why you may want to go ahead and create your own DTM. They probably prefer you not do this, honestly. They may tell you not to do it in the future, but I'm going to open up the file, and I just want to show you, and maybe other people will see this in the future, maybe even surveys or something, just to understand why is it a problem for you as a designer when you're continually to like reference in their file, and you're getting every single time all this other stuff that you don't want to see, and every time you reference it in, you have to go in, you turn off the LiDAR data, turn off the boundary, turn off like all these things that you have to turn off, and not in just one view, but in all the views, because when you're designing, as you know, maybe from that first class, that you're visualizing cross sections, right? So you could use any one of 8 views, right? And so that's kind of the same thing for all. Like right here, this may look fine in view 1. Everything is turned off, but maybe if I bring up another view, let's see what that looks like. Yeah, but so now I bring up another view, and remember, all I want is simply just those triangles. Just that, all I want is that boundary. I want a surface of the existing ground. I want nothing else showing up, you know, because you already have a ton of files referenced in. And then if like your fill is turned on here, you know, like all these voids, this topo, some of these levels, even in this view, are turned off. Let me, where the heck my levels go? Let me open up my level display. Yeah, if those turned on. And there's multiple ways that surveys can control what you see. Like I can see right now all the levels are turned on, but like in this view they may have turned, there's other ways of turning things off. And so it looks like they do have some things turned off in this view, like the brake lines you're not seeing, the LiDAR data. Maybe if I open up another window, window 5, let's see, do we see it there?
No, that's view number 2.
Oh, all right, so number 2. So you see what I'm saying, right? There's just a lot of stuff in there that the vast majority of the time, see the problem is with this 3D stuff is that all this stuff will show up not only just in your plan view, but in your cross sections. Like you'll be looking at your cross sections and all those brake lines, anything that you see there is going to clutter up like your cross section view. And then you could get rid of it by turning off the level, but it just takes time. All right, so that's my reasoning for showing you what I'm showing you, which honestly, Central Office is probably not super thrilled I'm showing you that. But, you know, we'll do it anyway. We'll say it's optional. We'll say it may go away. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create our own very clean DTM file, our own existing terrain file. We're going to put that file in your design folder so then you can control it. You can control the feature definition, meaning by default you can set it up as just a boundary, or you can turn the triangles on by default. You can turn contours on, do whatever you want because it's in the design folder. You have permissions to do, you know, whatever you want with it. Now I would say if you do that at the very end of the project, you may want to switch and point to this file, just so you're pointing to the surveys file. And that's one nice thing that you can do, because everything in ORD, you're telling it to use the active terrain, right? So it does allow you to have this alternate terrain in your design folder, and then at any point in time, reference in a different file, make it the active terrain. So when you finish out the job, be sure to use the surveys version. But if you want to save yourself some hassle as you're designing, maybe create your own. I'll kind of leave it at that. Okay, so I'm going to go to the design folder, and I'm going to create a file. And this is maybe like one of the times that I want to create a 3D file. Almost every single file in ORD is a 2D file, not a 3D file. Every file is a seed. Every file, with the exception of terrain files. I think that's it. Maybe something else, but right now all I can think of is just terrain. Normally, almost all files, they're 2D files, but they have a 3D model within that 2D file. And we'll talk about that later. But so what I'm getting at is when I'm making this copy, this is the one time that I do not want to use that 2D seed. I'm going to need, and I don't think Frank will put a 3D seed out for you here, just because you'll never need it with this one exception. Okay. So I'm going to create a 3D file. So I'm going to go to New, Document, my Advanced Wizard, and then I'm going to go out, and that file is located in a couple different locations. If it's something you don't do often, you can always contact Frank. Yeah, he can point you in the right direction where it's at if you can't find this. But once you've done it a few times, you'll probably remember one of the places you can get to it. And that would be, let's see, IDOT offices. There's one called IDOT Standards, CAD Standards, IDOT, the latest version here. Let's see, Organization Civil, it's pretty deep. Eventually we'll get to the seed folder. Wait a minute, let me back that up. Let me cancel that. I think I'm creating a folder, not a file. All right, so we're going to redo this. We're going to go to Document, New. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Hey Frank, could you point me in the direction of the seed file?
Email here.
IDOT standards, CAD standards, IDOT. I'm pretty sure it's right here. Not sure what I did last time. In any case, these two files, there's really only two main seed files that IDOT uses, a 2D and a 3D. They're in a couple different locations. You may have to play back this video or contact Frank when you need this 3D file. We'll say that. I'll point to it. I'm going to click Next. And then again, I'm going to use that same file naming convention. D672K96. And then the official name is EX Terrain. And then I'm going to add the word design at the end. And then I'm going to call it Existing Terrain Designers Version. And I'll show that it's a 3D file. Okay, so there's your 3D existing terrain file. going to open up that file, and I'm going to reference in that survey version. It's really not many steps at all. It's actually pretty easy. I know it took a lot of steps there just to get that file created, but actually creating the terrain is not bad. All right, so I'm going to reference in that survey all file. All right, so there it is. So here's the steps. It's actually super easy. Here's what you do. You go to the terrain tab at the top, and then I say I want to create, let's see, actually no. First I'm going to export this terrain, and then I'm going to re-import it. So I'm going to hover over the existing boundary, and then in my pop-up it's going to give me three choices here. The last one says export terrain model. So I'm going to export, and there's a couple different formats that you can use. I'm just going to use a GeoPack 10 format. And then it says, okay, where do you want to save that 10 file? And this, it's really only temporary, so you could save it just about anywhere. I don't even think I'm going to put it in ProjectWise. I'll just stick it on my desktop. It's just temporary. I hit save, and it's really fast, you know, only took a second. If I look at my desktop now, it should be there. Yeah. Yeah, so it's right there. Okay, so now I have a 10 file. So now I can either turn the display off or detach the surveys version. And now I'm going to create my own existing terrain from a file. So here's where I go to the terrain tab, from file. I am going to point to my desktop just because that's where I stored it. All right, then it just asked me just a couple questions in this dialog right here. And that is, what's the projection? We're going to make it the same thing as whatever our seed file was. That was Harn West. And then for the feature definition, what do you want that to be? Because I think we may have talked about this a little bit the first day with feature definitions. It's really more than just level, weight, and color. It has other attributes. In this case, it says, it's still going to be the same terrain, but do you want those? Do you want to visualize the triangles? Do you want to visualize the contours, or do you just want to see the boundary only? And almost always you're going to use that boundary only. Again, that keeps it clean, and you always have the ability, once you reference this into a design file, to override the display and turn the triangles on, or the contours. So I'm going to use existing boundary, and then we always use US survey feet, so that's always going to be your answer. Click on import, do a fit view, and there it is. That's doesn't look like much, but that's what you want. You don't want it to look like much. You just want this simple, clean, surface. And like I was saying, you can always, let me just re-visualize this to show you a few things that you can do with it. Or, if I hover over this, I can go to my element info. And because I'm in the actual file that terrain's in, I could change the display right here on the fly. If I want to see contours, I just double click on major and minor. There's my contours. If I want to see it in 3D, I go up here to rotate view, and if you rotate view, this is really important, otherwise you'll just shoot this thing off into space. Make sure that your snap is turned on, and make sure you take this guy here and snap it to anything that you want to rotate about. And so this is just one way that, that I can visualize this digital terrain. That's with contours. You'll see that you can turn on like low points and high points. It's really not too different than Geopack. Geopack had the ability to visualize a lot of different ways also. And you'll see that here too. If you want, flow arrows or, whatever. You want to show the voids, you can display it any way you like there. Or you could completely change the feature definition. But the way I like to leave it, and however you leave it here, is what you're going to see when you reference it in. And the whole point of us going through this whole exercise of getting our own terrain is so that you can have this nice, clean, boundary-only terrain. So let's leave it that way. So I'm going to go back to my view commands and switch it to top view. I want to turn off those contours. Just hover over element info, turn it off, nice and clean, do a save settings, and that's it. Then you're done from there. So now throughout your whole job, there's going to be many times you're going to be referencing in your digital terrain model. And when you reference it in, that's exactly what it's going to look like. Kind of uneventful. It's going to, unless you want to see, some of those other features. That you need it to be in your file. But as we develop this project, you're going to have so many lines. It's going to be so cluttered. You want as little as possible, and that's what you'll have if you take the time to create your own existing terrain. So, before I end the session and we take a break, any questions about that or comments?
When you say the settings, it should then, every time you open the file, keep the settings, whereas in Geopack sometimes it doesn't. So it should work, or?
Yeah, I would feel confident that it will hold its settings. I guess I haven't seen problems yet anyway with it.
Stuff.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all right. Well, that's the end of session 2.